Welcome. Thank you all for being here on this glorious day to the Bend Metropolitan Planning Organization. I will call this meeting to order. And how about we go around the table for introductions? Would you care to start?
Sure. Andrea Bro, Cascades East Transit.
Eric Lent, Cascades East Transit.
Bill Chang, Deschutes County Commissioner.
Bob Townsend, ODOT Area Manager.
Ari Mendez, he, him, Bend City Council.
Tyler Diekey, Bend MPO.
Kelly Kennedy, Bend MPO.
Barb Campbell. I serve on the Bend City Council and I'm chair of the MPO, and I prefer she and her pronouns. Tyler, or would you like to introduce who we've got online today?
It looks like we have James Ferrari. He's on the MPO Technical Advisory Committee. We have Greg Bryant, who's on the MPO Technical Advisory Committee. Chris Doty, representing Deschutes County Road Department. And I believe David Abbas from City of Bend Public Works.
That's great. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here today. Tyler, will you take us through the hybrid meeting guidelines, please?
Yes, the meeting's being recorded. And for those online, if you have a question, please use the raise hand function and we will call on you.
Thank you. That gets us to agenda item 3, which is our first opportunity for public comment. Would anyone like to address the MPO policy board?
No.
I don't see hands. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to agenda item number 4. I would entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes from April 19th.
I do have a question actually about the meeting minutes.
Sure.
On the Parkway Plan discussion, item number 10. It currently reads, the consensus of the board was to support further evaluate modifying Hawthorne access recommendations in the US 97 Bend Parkway Plan. It was clarified that the board support was not for changing the Parkway Plan. And I had understood the question to be, is there support for, I forget the word, reevaluating
Right.
or revisiting the Parkway Plan? And that was the consensus that the board came to. So it shouldn't say it was clarified that the board support was not for changing the Parkway Plan. It was clarified that the board support was to revisit and reevaluate the Parkway Plan.
I agree. I don't think we made a comment about whether or not to change it. We just agreed, yes, reevaluate.
Does
that sound right?
Yeah, I think so. I think some of it was around, like, we don't have authority over the Parkway Plan. We're just a review on it where the city and ODOT has final authority. So it didn't make sense for us to say we can approve of a change or not. We just,
Yeah. Is that all right? Can we make those changes to those, to the minutes? So do you want to make a motion to approve those amended, as discussed or something like that?
Yeah, so I move to approve the April 19th, 2024 Policy Board draft meeting minutes as with amendments as discussed.
Second.
Great. We have a motion from Councilor Mendez and a second from Commissioner Chang. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that is unanimous. Thank you. Thanks, Ari. Appreciate you catching that. All right, we're on to agenda item number 5. This is our Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program, or MTIP, and these are amendments, and MPO staff will take us through this issue.
So we just have 2 more amendments for you this month. These are just to remove 2 projects from the MTIP, and it's just due to a change in the funding source. So they were funded by the federal STPG dollars previously, and now it'll be state highway funds. And so it's not required that they're in the MTIP. So we've just requested that they be removed.
So the projects are carrying on, it's just that the funding source has changed.
Yes.
Yeah, funding source has changed, and with the funding source change, we don't need to list them in this document.
Got it.
So by taking them out, it just makes things a little bit easier for the recipients to access and use those funds.
Any other questions or comments?
And the MPO will continue to track those projects.
Absolutely.
No questions?
It sounds pretty easy to me. It sounds like we're already ready. Would someone like to go ahead and make a motion?
I can,
I move to approve the proposed amendments to the 2024-2027 MTIP as presented.
You gotta get a second over there. Thank you,
Sorry
Phil. No, it's okay. Thank you. We've got a motion from Counselor Mendez and a second from Commissioner Chang. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, please? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, staff, for keeping track of those things. Seems to me like we are in a period of flux with funding. Part of it because of the fund exchange, things are changing because of that. Yeah, great. Thank you for keeping up on all of that. That brings us to item number 6, which is federal GHG greenhouse gas performance measures and staff.
All right. So back in December, the Federal Highway Administration approved a greenhouse gas emissions target for state DOTs and MPOs across the country. And the measure would apply to all roads that are part of the National Highway System. And if you look at the slide there, you can see that within Bend, it includes all of our major roadways. So it's not only state highways 90, not only US highways 20 and 97, but it includes several of the city's major arterial roadways. Through this process, the feds gave MPOs and states a lot of leeway in how they go about making that calculation. And at the very front end of this, ODOT agreed that they would provide data for those local calculations for the MPO areas. I guess before I move on, any questions yet?
So all of those streets are considered federal highways?
Well, they're listed as part of the National Highway System.
System.
They're locally owned, but they're part of the National Highway System.
Interesting.
And I can, I don't want, at another meeting, we could kind of talk about how
Yeah,
those were determined.
yeah,
But yeah.
clearly it's not the history, they haven't historically been part,
No,
Yeah,
I mean, in the past,
interesting.
it was mainly just the state, state and US highway systems.
Uh-huh.
But then a lot of locally owned roadways have been added over the last 10 to 15 years across the country.
All righty then.
So after those were approved, there were 2 legal challenges almost immediately to those rules. And in March, in one of the US district courts, they nullified or vacated those rules back to US DOT. And so consistent with the court's decision, state DOTs and MPOs are not required now to submit initial targets, for this. ODOT chose to go ahead and develop and submit their targets anyway. And so they actually did that before this court ruling happened. And ODOT has said that they would agree to support any MPOs who want to continue moving in the direction of adopting these performance measures. And so the question before you today is, should we go ahead and develop those targets and report on this measure? And on the slide here, you can see the pros and cons. For us, it'll be pretty simple because ODOT will provide the data to us. It's a fairly minimal tracking effort to us now. I think it'd be useful as the city works to meet the CFEC rules and implement its community climate action plan. And then without it being a federal requirement now, we don't have a hard deadline to adopt this measure and report and track on it. But it's something we can just build into our normal work program, and we won't be tied to federal deadlines. The only con is it will take a little bit of staff time to do this, but I think it'd be fairly minimal. And we still may have, going back to this, it was remanded back to US DOT. I haven't read anything as to whether US DOT plans to revise this process and try and make another run at it. But they could in the future. So I think that's another pro would be that if they come back, we'd be prepared and already have our, have the groundwork done too with our targets.
Thank you. All right.
Two questions. So one is just a clarification, the proposal, so the initial US DOT effort was about reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and that requires tracking. What it sounds like you're proposing here is we're not setting targets, we're just going to at least track and provide the data.
Well, I think we could set targets if the board wants us to, and we could set our targets in line with what ODOT has adopted. And I think ODOT has set a target of, they have an annual target of like, it's fairly minimal, but it's a reduced amount of GHG emissions per year on the national highway system.
That sounds like a bigger conversation. I'm not necessarily opposed to it. But the second question is the article that you linked to in the meeting agenda mentions that there would be an effort to fund efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions consistent with adopting these targets. Do you think that would position us better to, given the legal uncertainty of this effort, presuming that they still want to fund these kinds of initiatives, if we have this data, will we be in a better position to qualify for future grants?
It's a great question. I mean, I can't say yes for sure, but I have to believe that it definitely would be, because within the current federal transportation legislation, there are a number of funding sources that are tied, specifically to climate change and reducing CO2 emissions.
Well, that's helpful, because the only thing that gives me pause about setting a target is we don't necessarily have a lot of the means as an MPO policy board to achieve those targets. I think we have some discretion in how we allocate some grant funding, which maybe would be useful for that, but it certainly seems like the kind of thing that we would be interested in doing, given it seems like it's relatively low cost and might open up more opportunities in the future.
Good comment.
Do you have thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean,
we're going to be relying on.
I mean, I think the thing here is I agree. These targets are tough, right? And influencing and then picking projects just based on the target when there's so many things from safety or some other priorities that we may have. But tracking information and having the data, certainly that's what we're doing on the ODOT side, right? And we've certainly tied it to some project selection, but I don't think it hurts at all for us to be active in it. I'd be hesitant to really have anything firm on what we want as targets or methodology for lowering those yet until we just know more info.
You don't want anything to change too quickly. No.
Exactly. It's just like you can imagine, right? It's just like, oh, these projects have to be climate friendly. And you're like, well, we have a terrible safety issue here. It just doesn't check the boxes, right? Yeah, we want to do it. Now our hands are tied. Not that would happen here, but that's always a worry in some of these when we introduce something new. I'm not saying that this isn't important. It's just we have a lot of different needs sometimes. It's nice to have a little bit more discretion when deciding versus tying ourselves to certain things until we have all the information. Certainly it's going to be a big decision point moving forward.
One question I have is kind of the geographic scope of the targets. I mean, if you're trying to reduce overall emissions for the segment of Highway 97 that falls within the MPO boundary, there's tons of decisions that you need to influence that are happening outside of the MPO boundary. I mean, people get in their car outside the MPO boundary and drive on that chunk of Highway 97. So I just don't understand what real leverage the MPO would have to influence those decisions within the MPO boundary, on emissions that are occurring within the MPO boundary on say Highway 97 or for Reed Market Road or Empire, there's definitely more ability to influence that, but it's hard to imagine setting targets for something that you can't control.
Yeah, the other one on just more information on the ODOT side, like installing a roundabout at a signal is considered climate friendly because there's more idling vehicles at a signal. Installing a roundabout at an intersection that has no signal and it's just a safety improvement is a negative climate friendly improvement because now it's slowing speeds, more idle time and things like that. And so it's just, those are these nuances that are so hard to have absolutes on when we would be like, well, at US 20 in Roble, for example, that's deemed climate friendly because there was a signal there and we put in a roundabout. So we're reducing idling time. US 20 in Cooley, it's actually an increase because there were no improvements, yet that's a tremendous safety benefit and has some other benefits, right? So I think that's just, a little nuance on when you have to check the box on the ODOT side is climate friendly or not. When we could also argue the pedestrian safety at US 20 Cooley is much safer, could promote more pedestrian and bicycle activity, which would be climate friendly. It's just very hard to show when vehicle emissions, outweigh everything in that discussion. But similar to what you're saying, the US 97 is another one. Like we're not going to one lane to reduce vehicle usage.
But we could recommend that.
Yeah, we could. That would be a tough one.
Then that is going to cause delay, which is going to mean vehicles spending more time idling in those lower speeds where they're less efficient and.
But I defer city council to have that argument.
Yeah.
Sounds like there's at least support for yes to track.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like to me. I will say I am proud to live in a state that just went forward and did this instead of suing, instead of taking the federal government to court. It sounds exactly like you said to me, Ari. It sounds like we've got support for tracking and but targets we are apprehensive about. I would make the comment that we are a single city MPO. And as Tyler mentioned, our single city, which is Bend, we do have a climate action plan. And that plan is looking to reduce greenhouse gases, and this data could be useful for that. And having said that, that would be my one comment. I don't want you to spend more time. One of the pro here is it's not going to take that much time. But I would say, maybe get in touch with Cassie, who is our climate, what's her? Coordinator, and maybe just check and see, is this data that we are looking to collect, is this what would be useful to them? Just making sure if we are spending the time, it is in fact as useful as possible to ODOT, to ourselves, to the city. Does that sound right?
I mean, could we also, if the state, if ODOT is choosing to develop and submit targets, could we just say we support the targets that are, whatever ODOT is saying it's doing, we support that.
And I would say
Within
even,
the MPO.
and also city of Bend. If we would just want to say, those two agencies have already decided on targets. And
We don't want to duplicate efforts.
no, exactly.
An advantage in terms of positioning the MPO in particular, potentially to say this is something the MPO does.
Right.
Therefore might be eligible for something in the future, but
Yeah.
I would defer to staff's input on that.
Yeah, before the legal case was decided, I think most MPOs were going to be, at least just in staff discussions, we were all moving in the direction of, simply supporting ODOT's their measure or their targets as the easiest, at least initial way to go, with the idea that if we wanted to modify them in the future, we could do that. Because when this was first put out there, when ODOT adopted their targets, then all MPO, we had 180 days to adopt our own targets. And so we were all internally talking about just supporting ODOT's targets, and then coming back a year from now with more data potentially, and maybe modifying our targets based on local input. So I think that's a good place to start, I think.
And seeking opportunities to provide input as ODOT is developing those targets.
So it sounds like there's support to track them, and then I think we can come back at some point this summer with the data.
Okay.
Show you what data is available and what it looks like for the Bend MPO area. That sound good?
Yeah, sounds great.
It's like Greg has his hand up.
Greg, go ahead.
Okay, I got two questions. They probably are simple. First one is, how often is National Highway System designation made? Is that every 5 years, 10 years, or how is that done? I'm just in case there's additional locations here that's going to be done in 5 years or something like that.
It has been. Do you recall, Bob, what the schedule is?
I don't know. I think there's one coming up next year though, because I know we're trying to adjust the designation up north. But if that's every 5 years, maybe what's the cycle?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Greg, can't answer that, but I know it's not an annual thing. It's for sure.
Yeah.
It's at least every
figured
5
that
years or even longer in terms of that time frame. It's not something we do very frequently.
Okay, is ODOT the one that designates that? I mean, by certain metrics of some sort?
There's decision criteria. It's not just this one. There's federal aid roads, right? We're in the city, like every numbered street basically qualifies for federal aid. And then there's the national highway system. So there's a lot of these different metrics and designations that open up different funding opportunities, different requirements. And I think they're all the same cycle, but they have a list of what has to be met.
Okay. Okay. My other question is, what was the argument that Texas had to go against this? Is there a short answer or not?
Yeah, I mean, their argument, I think there were 13 states that challenged these measures, and they said that USDOT did not have the authority to establish these measures, and that only Congress could do that, or that Congress didn't designate that authority to USDOT, and so the Northern District of Texas, they found that to be the case, or that was their ruling. And I think the other case was filed in Kentucky, and that the judge there made essentially the same ruling.
Okay.
It was outside the purview of USDOT to make these kind of measures required.
Okay. Just thought I'd ask.
Thanks, Greg. Any other questions, comments, discussion? It sounds like, yeah, we do have support for tracking where we don't want to set targets today.
Okay.
Does that sound okay?
Or we support ODOT's targets.
Okay, great. Do you want to go ahead and make that motion?
Efforts.
We need a motion?
I thought we.
We just wanted to
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, oh, so we've got direction to staff, I think. Yeah, sure, James, I'll give you one.
I did just really quick. I understand the importance of getting the measurements, but why support ODOT's recommendations on targets? You have no idea what a baseline is or anything at this point. I mean, that's putting support in some weird spot. Just a thought. You guys take it however you wish.
Thank you. So that is fair. And it looks like, Phil, you're correct. We don't need an actual motion. And I think that we have provided staff with guidance. Staff, do you feel like you know what we would like?
So I think, like I said, this summer we can come back with the data.
Great.
We can have that discussion about what ODOT's targets are and how they establish their targets, and whether then the board wants to adopt those same targets.
All right.
Does that sound good?
Does that sound all right to you, Phil?
Yeah.
All right.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everybody. That gets us on to agenda item number 7, which is MPO sponsorship of external speakers and events. Tyler?
Hopefully I'll make this quick. So we occasionally receive requests for funding support for external speakers and events, that type of thing. We've had 2 that we've helped fund in the last few years. When Charles Marone was here from Strong Towns, we provided funding, where we were one of the sponsors for that lecture. And then we also provided funding last summer when the Dutch Cycling Embassy was in town and had their multi-day workshop. We also get other random requests for different things. We don't have an official policy at the MPO about funding external sponsorships. Staff, what we're recommending is that the policy board only consider requests that have a direct transportation link. And when I say we've gotten requests to fund a sponsor for Building a Better Bend lectures and those type of things. And I think our direction on staff recommendation is that's fine if we can be open to receiving those requests, but that we should only be really thinking about funding requests that have some sort of direct MPO or transportation related link.
I think that's fair. That's exactly what I would say is that, one, education, our organization is a planning organization, and I really do believe that you need some education with the public before it's just part of planning, is educating the public, bringing the public along. And so that is why I have been in support of sponsoring some of these events we have sponsored in the past. But I also agree, those had, especially that second one, the Dutch cycling, and was entirely transportation. And I did believe that Strong Towns lecture series had a strong connection to transportation. So for myself, yes, I think this is just what we should be doing, is, focusing our money on transportation.
Did you have a comment?
Oh, go ahead.
I was thinking about this before the meeting because I think this has come up a couple of times when we're asked to evaluate potential grant requests as well. So it's the kind of idea about what's our framework, what are our guiding principles. And I'm not suggesting that we necessarily create more work today, but it did occur to me that, other boards and commissions and councils often do set goals or set policy frameworks for their activities. And I wondered whether whether that would be helpful for us too. And so, for example, we might say something like, we hold these values to be important: promoting transportation safety, reducing transportation greenhouse gas emissions, promoting transportation equity, increasing transportation options. There's a list of things that I think there's probably consensus on that are obviously all focused on transportation, but might provide the kind of guidance that would be useful when we say, well, where does this fit? If this is there might be something that has a lot of merit or value for other reasons, but if we feel that it's too far astray from these kind of core values or how we think about the role of transportation in addressing community challenges more broadly, maybe it's not a good fit. So if that sounds attractive, I recognize it could be potentially, I don't want to promote any kind of disagreement or divergence, but if that would be useful, I think that's something that maybe I would be happy to work with the chair on developing some kind of language that we could then bring back and see if there's agreement on that. That might be useful in helping to guide some of these other requests that we get.
Yeah, I think so. The only thing, and I can't remember, Tyler, what we call it, our ODOT strategic planning, right? But we have our goals and objectives sheet.
Yeah.
And as long as it's matching that, and then my only other add-on to that, I think that's a good point. But I think some of that document exists. Like you just be like, hey, if it doesn't meet one of these criteria, I can't remember how many we had that one day that we were reviewing. But also, I always hate to be these were perfect because we were the last dollar in type of thing, right? They have to we're just a matching agency. We're not sponsoring something unless we come up with it here and say, hey, this is our baby, where we negotiate the price, the topic and everything. But otherwise, we should always just be the last dollar or a percentage of it, not fully funding something unless it's at our request.
So, yes, that I believe also, yeah, we did that, but it has been quite a few years, putting together our goals and.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
So, yes, I think that those kind of guiding principles, goals absolutely are helpful with something like a funding request. Does it meet any of our goals that we have already decided? Can make decisions like that simpler. And I also believe that we haven't updated those, we haven't discussed those with the current board. And if we want to have a discussion, look at what we do have now for goals, update those. I certainly think, certainly the city of Bend, that's every 2 years, the goals change.
What was the document we did last year, though? Because we were rewording a few of those.
Okay.
Oh, that was for our long-range plan update.
Oh, long-range plan.
But I think we could look to those, and there was also that other document that you're referring to from several years ago that we could bring back to this, or I could at least share with this group again.
So might I propose that maybe we can have a conversation, and Bob, if you could send me the goals and planning for ODOT that you mentioned, that if we feel like it would be useful to add something else or revisit
Exactly,
it,
right?
then we can come back and make that recommendation. And if not, we can come back and report why we think
And
that
just say,
it's not
looks
necessary.
like it's okay. Okay, I think that sounds good. Yeah.
That's
Phil?
okay.
One other thing I would add is, maybe we want to think about some dollar sideboards
Mhm.
for this. Like, I don't know, I don't know how much we provided for these two in the past. I don't know where those funds came from,
Mhm.
but I definitely want to think about the opportunity cost.
Mhm.
If it's, if we want to make a significant amount of dollars available, then what are we not doing because we're doing that? And if we don't want to make a significant number of dollars available, then I would worry less about it. But just kind of like, would you want to budget a certain amount every year, and kind of have that hold that to be available,
Or at least a capped budgeted amount available for that. Yeah. So I would say, it might not be an absolute dollar amount. We just don't have big funding available at the end. So, it's all.
That there's probably not a lot of discretionary dollars to
Right.
this kind of stuff. So,
But we might want to discuss something like, a percentage, do we ever want to be the primary sponsor? Or do we want to look at these things like Bob was talking about for capital projects where we're the last dollars in, we're leveraging, we help with things.
or do you want to say, we won't provide more than $2,000 to.
Right. So for the Dutch cycling, it was my memory that, we provided a lot more than $2,000. Was it 20? No.
It was about 10.
10, and which in the world of ODOT numbers and city of Bend numbers and county numbers, $10,000 is not a substantial amount of money. But it ended up being, we were one of the primary sponsors. We did in fact cover, was it most of the costs for that event?
About half, I think.
Half, and so maybe, it's something like that. Do we want to be, but I think that's what we're going to think about for this discussion that we have said we would like to have regarding our goals. And at that time, we could also do that does that sound right? It's the
Yeah,
same
yeah.
discussion?
Yeah, I mean, and like one other dimension of that is if you have a certain maximum amount in mind,
Uh-huh,
then you can tell more organizations, hey, if you've got something
right,
you're interested in having a sponsor
right.
that's, kind of fits the scope. Like, well, the goals, if you set goals around sponsorships, then you can say, hey, we have certain, we have a limited amount of sponsorship dollars available. All you groups that are out there that are doing this work in our community, just know that there's actually some sponsorship dollars available. There may be organizations who have never thought of asking because they don't think of the MPO as a sponsoring organization.
Mhm.
Of course, then, like it's almost like we're getting into like administering a small grant program, another small grant program, which is how much do you want to do that?
Yeah.
Maybe for the benefit that we're providing, you do want to do that, but.
I think the point is that, yes, we want to have that conversation. We want to try and think about what decisions we can make in advance so that we are not approaching requests one-off every single time. How much, should we do this or not? So we have some sort of a structure. And I do agree. I think that, this might be an opportunity to spread the money around, if you were, and have more things happening with our support rather than one time because they happen to know we exist. A bunch of our money went toward this one thing.
Yeah.
Bob?
No, I mean, I think that all sounds good. I think there's a balance. So once we start a program where people can submit a lot of things, maybe we should just pick what our top priority is and have staff get a speaker or a program for that versus, soliciting things too. I mean, so there's a fine balance there, but that would be my only other comment.
Mm-hmm. I definitely specifically do like that idea of setting a budget for this, maybe even setting a top limit for any individual grant or sponsorship. Staff, does that sound like direction you need?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, really? Not just more confusing,
No,
more
it's
things
good,
to think
actually.
about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Counselor Mendez and you, and both of you volunteered to
To-
write it.
Okay, all right.
So,
Good.
can't complain.
I believe we
Okay.
said we would evaluate whether we should write it, and if we decided that it wasn't gonna be helpful,
No,
we'd say
we can
why.
We would just say, nah, this looks fine, leave it alone, good enough.
But we'll come back at a future meeting
Uh-huh.
with a proposal or an explanation of.
No, I do. I think that's a good comment. We should be looking at these periodically and,
Okay.
Yep, great. All right, that gets us to agenda item number 8, which is what we've all been waiting for. We have our guests, Andrea Bro and Eric Lent from Cascades East Transit, who are going to give us an update.
Yeah, thank you.
Works.
So I will try to do a very quick roundup of our services and recent statistics. This will cover program updates and that sort of thing, and we'll touch on some policy, and then Andrea will get into some more meatier subjects. So, looking at our annual ridership statistics, this is year over year through March of this year. We're doing a lot of big budget committee meetings this month, so we had this stuff ready for you. Total system ridership is over 600,000 trips in the past year. That's an increase of nearly 50%. Now, as James mentioned, having baselines being important for context, everyone's probably familiar with what happened with the pandemic and how ridership fell off a cliff. So one thing that I've done with our board of directors, that's COIC's board of directors, if you look at the board reports that we submit to them, I created charts that show the 3 years before the pandemic, the 3 years since, and then current. And that helps see a little better what baseline used to be, what the new normal looks like, and where we're going. And these numbers in every service category are improving. Yeah, they are reaching pre-pandemic levels for certain services like the community connectors. That's the rural routes between cities. And recreation services, they're actually exceeding pre-pandemic levels. With Dial-A-Ride, we're seeing a lot of improvement thanks to recent technologies. That's our improved efficiency with dispatch systems. That's really helping us get more trips out of the same number of drivers and vehicles. And then Bend Fixed Route is also doing better. We do still see seasonality to all of this, but across the board, ridership is improving.
And Eric, I just grabbed my calculator.
Yeah.
I divided 600,000 by 365 days in a year. And that's 1,600, almost 1,700 trips per day.
Yes.
How about that?
Yeah. And at the bottom there, I put the improvement year over year is 537 more rides
Every day.
than last year.
Congratulations. Yeah,
Thank you.
great.
I know you're doing this for Van Pool, which is a really cool sounding
Yes.
program.
Yeah.
But did you also look at, because Van Pool in particular is actually taking bites out of what might otherwise be single occupancy vehicle trips.
Yeah.
Is there any way to quantify how bad would traffic be if all of these people had to drive their own personal vehicles or something like that?
I will say for van pools, I know Commute Options, who we contract with them to manage the program. They would be able to do that on their level, but we could do that on our level.
Commute Options has a program where they can calculate the CO2 per rider and have some interesting stats based on that. I would have to do a little bit of modeling, but we can definitely do that. Thank you for mentioning that, because I meant to highlight the van pool service. Brand new this year. We've piloted it. That's one of the things we started during the pandemic, but officially came out of pilot status July last year. In that year since, or year to date since, over 30,000 trips. And we are up to just over 40 vehicles on the road with this program. For most of this past year, we had fewer than 30 vehicles. And these are like Toyota Highlander type vehicles that hold 4 to 8 people. This is getting really good bang for the buck. And it's reaching places that we can't send transit vehicles, big buses.
And would you remind me, is that with Enterprise Car Rental?
We contract through Enterprise. They provide the vehicle, do maintenance.
All 40 of those vehicles are Enterprise vehicles.
Yep.
And then Commute Options administers the program for us.
That's tremendous.
I would love to hear more about at a future time, the potential to offset single occupancy vehicle trips, because I think from a city council perspective, increasingly we're seeing the pressure to relieve congestion by expanding road capacity. So we're looking at expanding roundabouts, adding turn lanes, and so forth.
Yeah.
To the greatest extent that we can provide a viable alternative, I would love to hear that, because often I feel like the cost is probably less. So having that information is like, hey, we can talk about this investment in the capital improvement project list, or since we'll be revisiting our transportation system plan next year, we can look at investing in these alternatives that will still get the same number of people where they need to go, but it will cost less. It will have lower, climate impact.
And currently this program is fully funded by STIF, Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund. We're looking at how to structure that for sustainability going forward as, we reach what we're comfortable spending the STIF dollars. And as we're launching this, we're working with employers to help organize these. So Basics in Redmond, U.S. Forest Service, and Bend MPO schools. These are easy ways to get people all going to the same place in the same car, right? But we can restructure how that program works in the future so that it can provide trips across town, right? Things to figure out, but it's doing very well right now. And we have the fastest growing program in the state.
The West Coast.
West Coast, yeah.
What about fuel? Who pays for fuel?
We do.
Stiff,
What about insurance?
stiff.
So this has got to be, there's probably 160, 200 people in those 40 vehicles, maybe more. They have no transportation costs getting to work and home every day.
Correct.
And a van comes to their door, picks them up, takes them exactly to work because the van is full of people who are all going to the
And
same
that's
place.
just the same as if they were taking our bus, but we can send someone out to Chemult. Or we have one going from Warm Springs to the
Oh,
ski
good.
bowl. So long as it starts within our service area or ends in our service area, we can take you where you need to go.
I'm just so delighted with this program. I
Yeah.
really, the success of it, I remember seeing those advertisements from Enterprise. You know, I think I asked very early on, doing this, can we do this? You know, I'm just really delighted. This
But
is such a.
we are
great-
still in talks with different employers across
Uh-huh.
town, so if you
Uh-huh.
guys want to advocate for us.
I have an
appreciate the help.
idea. Our airport.
Oh, yeah.
I went out on a tour out there one time and it was, I think, with one of those companies that's actually making jets or something. And, you know, frankly, these are, some of the folks have the, you know, fancy sports cars or whatever. And heard the comment at our own airport one time that how about a bus that goes out to our airports? And, you know, maybe that, yeah, that might be the next place to get a van pool going.
And the exclamation put on this is that this is still public transit. They're vans, but it is
Right.
public transit.
That's fantastic. Public-private partnership, I believe we call
Yep.
this.
And to more so to the MPO, when Eric says we piloted it up until July of last year, truly what that means in our world, we were not reporting our metrics to the National Transit Database, okay? Which opens us up to auditing a whole plethora of things that we need to be prepared for once we start reporting on these metrics. So we felt comfortable post-pandemic, this program is sustainable enough to start reporting on it and start working with the federal government on it. So those trips are now added to the NTD, which is part of the formulaic funding that we receive, the City of Bend, 5307 funding. Right now, our funding we receive is for a city under 200,000. This metric helps us open up to additional $5307 through what's another program called STIC. It's something in 10 cities. I don't know if you know that one. It's a small sub funding source.
Transit intensive cities.
Thank you.
Corvallis gets those from.
Yep. So basically, if we hit another benchmark, we get an additional 500K coming in through the city of Bend. And then once the city of Bend continues to grow, we receive additional $5307. So from a funding perspective, there is more to it than just the program itself. It starts to open up CET to other funding channels. Again, there's requirement, reporting, auditing, but the good side is we will get additional funding as the program continues to grow.
Yeah, we like the success for success sake, but it does
All right.
help us
Yeah.
maintain the program too.
When it helps bring in money, that's a good thing too.
Absolutely.
Eric, I wrote down community connectors back to pre-COVID levels, recreational services exceeding pre-COVID. And what did you also comment on the other categories? And I'm particularly interested in the Bend fixed route. Is that back to COVID levels as well?
Not quite, but it's
Pre-COVID.
somewhere between COVID and pre-COVID levels. So we are about halfway there. Yep. And it's turning into a pretty sharp incline.
I'm just going to add a selfish detail. It doesn't help that there's a detour every 5 minutes in the city and that our folks are having a hard time depending on Bend Transit when we reroute it every other week.
We joke that there's a smoke season, but now there's also detour season.
Yeah.
Did you say you thought David Abbas was online? David Abbas, are you listening?
His is pretty short-lived though. I think it's more,
I hear you.
it's all the big EIPD projects that are water, sewer and geobog
Yeah.
projects that are.
No, I mean, in the end, it's good. It's just from a short-term perspective, it's tough to gain some reliability. I will say Eric's been a trooper. He spends probably 4 hours every Friday logistically figuring out the system for the next Monday.
Wow, wow.
So, thank you, Eric.
So doing a quick roundup of our service offerings, it's not just buses, we have the van pools, which we just talked about. The picture there is a Bend resident who works at the Bend Pine Schools down at Sun River. And we did a field trip down there to meet his van pool team with KTPC. They were so excited to talk about this and they wanted to be on TV and talk about it. So it was a huge benefit, great personal stories out of that. But again, this is traveling from Bend to Sun River every single day for teachers. When that story aired, we got a handful of teachers at other schools saying, can we get this too? So it has an impact. Other programs, the Veterans Healthcare Transport. This one has been in a somewhat precarious state of funding for the past year, as it started out with funding from the state Veterans Affairs Agency. And it was uncertain whether we'd be able to continue it at the level of service that we do. Again, this is a program that we really excel at because we have those efficiencies in our area, and a lot of rural demand, but it is a costly program and it's something that Andrea's done a lot of work to sustain. Some of the more familiar programs, ADA Paratransit, Rural Dial Ride. That's your on-demand services for medical and others in need. Rural Dial Ride is, of course, open to the general public, but the ADA Paratransit in Bend is qualifications-based. Community connectors, those are the rural routes between Bend and Redmond, for example, or Lapine and Bend. We see a lot of heavy use, especially on the Redmond to Bend route and up to Madras and Warm Springs. Some of the other routes, we get some of our most reliable frequent flyers. These are people that depend on this service to get between cities for their job, for their medical needs, and whatever it is that keeps them going. And there's the fun stuff, the recreational transportation. We'll touch on some of that in a moment here, but that's also public transit. And Bend is a little unique in that we cover this full spectrum. So finally, the Bend over the fixed route services.
Are we going to discuss Dial a Ride a little more?
I don't think I have
we
that
can-
in terrible detail on here, but yeah.
We had an event yesterday, accessibility event, and got to hang out with Derek, who participated. Thank you so much, CET. And he was saying that the Dial a Ride program is at capacity and it's, requiring more management of those routes and trying to get more people at the same time. All of that is true. It plans to expand that, any comments about that?
So right now, the technology is being put to good use to see how efficient we can get. So there's a balance between the efficiency of the dispatching system and customer service, right? So we're at a teetering point when I work with my dispatchers to say, are we willing to build efficiency with lowering customer service? Meaning, no, we can't get you to your appointment at 12, but we can get you there at 1 o'clock. And I'm just using a pedestrian example, but basically the system, which is just like Uber and Lyft, dynamic scheduling, we're going to be testing what we can do to get more people in the system, but we may not be able to get you into the exact window that you're looking for, right? So as the city expands, gets more congested, there's going to be an uncomfortable phase where people that were used to getting across town in 10 minutes, it's now taking 21 minutes. And so there's a learning curve right now taking place in Bend Dial a Ride.
Probably entered that phase more generally as well.
Yes. Yeah. So the same is happening, as a microcosm within Dial a Ride. So that is something our supervisor over at the call center monitors very deeply. And so we're seeing if that's possible. We can't add more shifts. There's 9 to 10 shifts per day, 7 days a week on Dial-A-Ride. The vehicles are taking a toll. We're ordering more. But we have to adhere to BOLI law with driver breaks and meals and things like that. So we're at capacity, and we're going to see if the system can handle more, but it would be, the side effect would be not tailoring it exactly to what these folks want.
So if I understand what you're saying, then you're saying we've really reached the limits of benefits from technology that we can wring from existing resources, but in order to expand service, we're looking at needing more resources to hire additional drivers or call center operators.
We're already in the call center. Right now, I'm waiting on 13 vehicles to be delivered. Until that can happen, then we can hire more drivers. I just don't have enough vehicles.
Yeah, I think last time we talked about driver shortage. Now we're hitting our capacity with vehicles. So,
But it also sounded like, I mean, with technology and other things, but there's gonna need to be some modifications in people's.
More of the education side.
right.
How the system.
And a good example is,
So it's not
yeah,
people are gonna have to change their schedules a little bit more.
yeah.
Right, where the woman was used to going to Fred Meyer every Tuesday at 10 a.m. because that's my routine. Do we have an education campaign where we go, unfortunately, we may not be able to meet that reservation, but we can drop you up at Fred Meyer an hour before, an hour later, based on capacity. So there's going to be an education component that I don't quite have the resources yet, but we want to make sure we maintain the customer base and the reliability. And there's, not to get into the weeds, there's also priority for the federal government. We are required to give rides to those of disability first, then elderly, then low-income senior. We're audited on that priority because these are paratransit dollars. So you can imagine there's even education within the demographics that we serve. So that's going to take a little adjustment as well.
And part of it is as the vehicles fill up, you're making more stops, the trips get longer. The software can help us prioritize that route and plan it out most efficiently. But it's still the case if you're going from southern end of Bend to St. Charles and making stops on 3rd Street or wherever, it's just a longer trip as if there's more people utilizing it. So that's one example where efficiency gets more trips out of that same vehicle, making the circuit. But for the passenger, they might have to wait a few more minutes.
The other thing we discussed is eligibility for Dial-A-Ride service. I learned that a doctor's note is sufficient but unlike I had surgery on my knee and had the hang tag to be able to use disabled, but that tag was only for 3 months or something. And I learned that unlike those tags, which, expire after a certain time after you've recovered, that eligibility for Dial-A-Ride never expires. And,
It expires per year.
Oh, it does. Okay, so
So,
every year you have to reapply or something.
Yeah, I'll just
Okay.
spend 2 seconds on this. We have temp eligibility for exactly what you described with your
Okay.
knee. Then we do yearly eligibility that requires the yearly doctor's note. If someone has a permanent disability, and this is where we've worked with the, Carol's group, the pretty active group there.
Sure.
If you're permanently blind, we're not going to ask you to.
Right, every year. Are you
So
still
there's-
blind?
There's
And that's
nuances in
part of
the
the form
eligibility.
asks the doctor to complete what is the type.
Uh-huh.
So it's speaking to that, so that one, we can, if you have wheelchair needs, we can ensure that we factor that extra time into load,
Mhm.
right? But it also asks, is this a permanent disability? If not, what is the duration? And we can accommodate.
Reevaluate in a year. Yeah. Thank you. That's good information.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. So Redmond Flex Routes, this is one I just wanted to briefly touch on to tout one of our bigger projects for the year. But this is something that's in our 2040 master plan. This is something we talked about in the city of Redmond since 2009, I want to say, when they were doing their transportation studies. So this is us following our master plan. Sometimes it seems like projects are far, far away, but they are coming. We are checking these boxes. We've got a lot of big projects defined in the master plan for Bend and the MPO area. So we're really excited about pulling this one off here. And just briefly, flex routes are similar to fixed routes that we have in Bend, but you can call ahead to deviate, say, I want to be dropped off a block over that way. We can do that. Wow. So that's something, while ridership is low and just getting started, it helps us establish the route and build habits.
And do the buses, it's 2 loops. Do they only go in one direction around that loop, or
Yeah.
are the buses going opposite? No.
Yep, and they're still on schedule. We still have some fixed stops on these routes. So it gives you that predictability. So you can know it's going to be coming in another 30 minutes or whatever. Yep. Couple quick service change roundups here. Bend fixed route. We're looking at restoring frequency. Part of this was the detours. Routes 1 and 3 were impacted by detours and just congestion related to construction. But what we're looking to do here is make all of our east-west, north-south routes 30 minutes. And this will achieve that, we're hoping, by July, that we'll have all of them at 30 minutes.
They're currently 45.
Currently 45, yep. Not all of them are 45 at the moment, but the ones that are on detour, this will have all of the east-west, north-south ones aligned to that 30-minute schedule. And we're hoping that we can work with City of Bend on like the east-west, north-south corridors that we're trying to do for bike routes and pedestrian travel to match that. But this is something that's in our 2040 master plan to continuously improve that and bring those times down.
And all of those routes begin and end at Hawthorne Station?
That's right.
Yeah.
Until we get mobility hubs online, everything's through that central hub. Community connectors are adding frequency as well. This is something happening next June or this June. Thanks to rejiggering some schedules, we're able to add a new lunch run on a couple, and others are getting 2 additional runs. So just we're trying to focus on delivering frequency and predictability.
I know that Redmond Proficiency Academy Drive, that's a lot of those full buses are full of kids going to RPA from Madras, from Bend, even from Redmond themselves. So what about in the summertime? Those kids are not going to school. Do those buses continue? Is there an adjustment specifically because of that?
So 2 things on that. We do see probably a 15 to 20% drop towards the end of June. However, the RPA is starting to add more summer service school programs. So that number isn't as fluctuating. The one that has the most impact is Redmond Sisters, which is also Heart of Oregon and a bunch of other student-related youth things. So it's not as big as a swing as it used to be, but it's still July and August are the lower points for community connector.
I'm glad it's not as big of a swing. That means that, it's more folks. It's not just this. Yeah, great.
Quickly, the rec services are launching just after school gets out. That's the week of Juneteenth. They each have different start dates as we're working with different partners on each, but we're getting closer. Finally, Route 3, I want to call out, we changed the route for this one to now cut through Northwest Crossing. Now, that's not because demographics there or anything. We got feedback to this effect from the restaurant workers there. When one of these detours happened, we were forced to go through there. And they were talking to our drivers saying, can you please make this permanent? I've been walking from Shevlin Park Road down to Northwest Crossing to go to La Rosa, back of house cooks. And after we heard that, more people started chiming in saying, same, like this is a huge benefit for us. So this is something we were able to do very quickly in response to that public feedback. Just make that change. The timing all worked out. Our drivers are familiar with it, so let's just
So
make it
there's
happen.
the silver lining to the detour cloud,
Yes,
David.
David, thank you.
All right. I'll run through a few quick projects updates. We are going to bid soon for consulting services for capital plan development. This is looking at developing a more discrete 5-year plan. We're a growing agency. We're professionalizing the way we do things, and we want to get some help with this plan. We're trying to make this something like a Christmas tree consultant bid, where we want to talk about clean fuel transition plans. That's building on our recent feasibility study. For federal standards, for certain grants, you need to check a couple boxes on having a transition plan. So this is filling the gap between our feasibility study and what's required for those federal grants, but also helps us get to where we want to go. We'll be packing a couple other questions into that too, talking about funding and asset management, life cycle analysis. Big one I want to touch on, and I'll touch on the next slide too, the bus stop improvement project. So this is one almost a year ago now. You guys gave us $300,000 for shelters, and that was intended to kick off this project. We became short-staffed, and I went on paternity leave, and a lot's happened since then. And we got a little bit delayed, but we've been rebuilding our team. We've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes to build standards and specifications, get vendors lined up and all that good stuff. And we are hoping to have this off the ground this summer. This is something where you will see a tangible impact on the street as we improve bus stops. So not just those shelters, but we're looking at improving all of the amenities, the signage, wayfinding, and more. And other big projects are coming to fruition with our security cameras. Install will start in June 24th. Those are going to be hitting the street. Asset management system is coming online. We're going to be using the same software system that City of Redmond, City of Bend, Deschutes County all use for asset management and maintenance systems of their vehicles. And I've been highlighting the Innovative Mobility Program micro grant at meetings like this because it's open to nonprofits. We're going to be applying for that, but if anyone else is listening and interested, that is open to more than just us. Quickly looking at the bus stop improvement projects. Again, we're going to be looking at revising our infrastructure guidance standards. That's so when a developer comes to us and says they want to integrate transit into their project, we can have something at hand to hand them on how to build a stop. David, I see a hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Sorry not to interrupt, but just a thought on that last slide. You're talking about the new security camera effort. If you haven't already talked with Bend PD, Chief Krantz and that team, they've got a centralized location. I don't have the proper title or term on the tip of my tongue at this point, but there's probably interest in any kind of security camera or public camera into that centralized area as far as public safety.
I
That
actually met with them a couple months ago and got to see their system in action. So we are going to keep that in mind. Of course, there's, being a separate government, questions about how we transfer things, but we are going to have those talks. And I'll also mention as we build mobility hubs, enhanced bus stops, we're going to look at having security at these sites as well.
Perfect. Sounds like you guys are already connected. So good.
Yep. Thank you. Bus stop improvement project. This is bringing us up to modern standards that City of Bend residents expect of us. No more faded signs, no more QR codes that say, please check our website. We want to have information that's out there, current and accurate. And we're going to have a big community input process as a part of this. So helping us place the site for those shelters that you granted us and, figuring out what we want to do. Actually, David, one thing I might connect with you guys on is seeing if we can piggyback on Bend Works app. If anyone ever talks to you guys about our bus stops, please pass that along.
Yeah, certainly.
You might connect with maybe Stephanie Betteridge on that too.
Mm.
Sounds like she's involved with some of the routing to Parks District.
Yeah,
or
okay.
Other districts when they come up. The goal is to have one stop
Yes.
and then
Yep.
residents can use the app and then have it get routed appropriately.
Yep.
But I think she mentioned that she was working on that, so maybe connect with Stephanie
Okay.
Betteridge.
Cool. Thank you. And next slide, I just have a couple pictures of some of the improved signage that we have. I want to let folks know we've got free Wi-Fi and easily find additional information like our rules and service animal policy and things like that. We're going to have new signs out on the street and all that good stuff.
All right, I know we got about 10 minutes left for our agenda item. I do want to just speak briefly on the Hawthorne Station improvement project. So if you recall, a number of years ago, there was a movement to remove us given the spillover into neighborhood streets. Long story short, we received some funding and idea to redo the parking lot to bring fleet onto our property and not onto Fourth and the Safeway side of Hawthorne. We've worked closely with our major business owners surrounding the space. We are under construction as we speak. We're actually starting to see what it's going to look like. The completion date for the entire thing will be this September. And again, the ultimate goal is to bring the traffic onto our property and not onto neighborhood streets. So we're knee deep into the construction project. Phil, back in your day, those bioswales are being filled. I'm sorry, but they're now gone and more sophisticated drainage is coming in. So thank you, Bill. We're excited.
Dry wells,
All right.
stuff like that.
So yeah, this was something obviously from the neighborhood. It will make it look like a more modern mobility hub rather than the old Cascade Gas utility building that we're in. Next slide. Just a brief update on our staffing. We contract the Bend service out. We have roughly 25 drivers, 35 on the rural side, dispatchers, CSRs, mechanics, maintenance workers, supervisors, and administrative staffs.
I was going to mention too on staff is these numbers are kind of low, right? We don't have a procurement officer. We don't have our own in-house legal team. We don't have, contracting owner's rep. So we're looking for partnerships on a lot of these things. We're looking to partners' expertise, but we are looking to hire and expand in the future. Until we can get there, though, we need help. So that can be help in finding efficiencies in permitting processes and navigating systems for applications and all that sort of thing. We are a very lean team. As I said, we're trying to professionalize and build the in-house capacity to do a lot of these things. But right now we are bootstrapping a lot.
All right, so I believe everybody in the room is familiar with the STIF funding. That's the payroll tax for transit. Right now, those payroll tax dollars go to Deschutes, Jefferson, Crook, and the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. There is a movement among the QEs to eventually transfer the program over to COIC. And so we are just making that known. It's been mentioned to the COIC board. It's mentioned at the QE stiff meetings. It's mentioned through our regional committee here at CET. So just letting you know that there is movement underway. We are not a transit district, thus we don't receive the funds directly. But Tammy Bainey, our executive director, will be leading that conversation at the state level to see if that's plausible. But we first wanted to gain approval from the board and the QEs that this is the most appropriate direction. If this were to occur, basically administratively, the counties would not be responsible for reporting and reimbursement and auditing. Those administrative functions would fall onto CET.
When you say Tammy is looking to see if it's feasible, do you mean feasible to become a transit district? Or
No, just
to do this
to do
that's out
this
there?
particularly.
Okay.
And
And-
what we, go ahead.
I was gonna ask about transit districts, you know, what's the next step on that? Who moves? How do we move forward?
So, well, first I'll say this, the function that we're looking for, kind of a quick solution here, is simply an IGA that would allow all 4 QEs in Central Oregon to transfer the STIF program over to CET. So that's kind of the quick and dirty of it. As for the transit district conversation, Tammy is walking that with the COIC board.
Okay,
Okay, and
Okay.
that's where it sits.
great, thanks.
If the COIC board is not supportive, is there still a way forward?
From what I gather, not at the moment.
Who's our COIC? Is that Anthony? Yes.
Well, the COIC board is made up of 15 regional members that I think it's not proportional to population. So City of Bend has 1 representative. And I worry that the result is a disproportionate concern to issues that don't necessarily serve the City of Bend.
So I will mention on this, part of what we're going to consultants for with the capital plan is also looking at funding options, which will look at the legal question and how to establish a district as well. And we're hoping this isn't completed yet. That's what we're asking for, at least. Because there are a lot of permutations with how this can go. If we do form a district with taxing authority, the law says that you can only tax the areas that are being served, right? So we're not going to be talking about like Culver and Metolius, for example, because we're not going to be sending service at that level there. So there will need to be conversations about how to structure the governance of that eventual district, which may be different than COIC. Now we're hoping to maintain efficiencies and keep it all housed under COIC because that's the way things work and it works for us now, but City of Bend has its own interests, right? So we want to meet our obligations to partners and see what makes the most sense for governance structure in this
And
specific
just to
regard.
clarify, I think what I'm saying is that the City of Bend has different economic
Right.
dynamics that would be
Yeah.
better supported by a different kind of transit than would be suitable in a rural setting. So I feel like it's a mismatch of interests that that will be a
Yeah.
challenge to navigate. It's
Yeah.
not one size fits all.
Yep.
Thank you.
And just adding on this QE thing, this will almost certainly involve legislation that will be very narrowly tailored to our needs because the QE system is different in other areas. It functions differently for other agencies. TriMet, for example, is the QE for smaller agencies in the region there. And there's some political considerations with that. So this will require some diplomacy at the state legislative level.
And the next slide just outlines what we're doing right now with the requirements of STIF. We help manage the program on behalf of the counties. So this is just the timelines throughout the next few months as we prepare for the 25-27 STIF plan. So that's just outlining some of those timelines. And then we can move to the next slide. So you can imagine a number of years ago before STIF existed and CET was managed by Karen Friend, there was a lot of duct taping to make things happen because there was not a lot of funding available. STIF is our lifeline right now. So STIF is the blue that pays for all of the various divisions within our agency, primarily fuel, materials and services, personnel, maintenance, and capital. And those are the other various funding sources. So STIF has now become the reliable funding source for CET to operate and is the only way we can move forward in terms of expansion. That's it. 1 minute. So I did just want to spend just a minute talking kind of, future funding and the outlook for CET. So right now, our connection with the Bend MPO, we are required to share our, what's called a public safety action plan. And so right now we piggyback off the state plan for agencies less than 100 vehicles. Right now, CET is around 80 vehicles. So once we hit into what's called tier 2, more requirements will be required of CET and connections into the MPO that the public transit provider serves. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. 5307 funding, the funding that is directed towards Bend fixed route is growing as the population grows, and the 2020 census was accounted for this new formulaic funding. We're seeing the most 5307 funding coming into CET. So we think we can use that funding to expand frequency on the corridors, continue to hire drivers under the contract. So we're excited about that. Eric mentioned the requirement for the zero transition fleet plan. Where CET is right now is it will be difficult for us to go all electric on our larger buses simply because we're in the high desert. It's either hot or cold, and the heating capacity of our buses will destroy the battery life pretty quickly. So we're looking at our smaller vehicles for EV, which is dial-a-ride, passenger vans, and looking at RNG, CNG, and potentially in the future, hydrogen fuel cell for the larger buses here in Bend. But unfortunately, our purchasing power is cut in half when we go buy those vehicles. They are twice as expensive as our diesel. And then the last thing I'll mention is we have been fareless now for 4 years on public transit. We will most likely keep it that way for the foreseeable future. To be very blunt, it cost us more money to count the money on fixed route than it is we get it. But the recreational routes do have a fare box recovery rate of over 100% on most of them, which is how we operate. Yes. Ride the River and Lava Butte are at 150% fare box recovery to 200, which means we can operate it. There's no grants that pay for those recreational services. And Mount Bachelor right now is subsidized 60 to 70% by Mount Bachelor LLC, and the rest is covered by fares.
And the one that we're looking at is the summer one next. That's currently funded by a grant
Correct.
this summer.
Thank you so much. Andrea, is this your last meeting with us?
Probably. I could come next month.
Okay.
All right,
Andrea is
we'll make a topic.
moving out of transportation and into winemaking. And I will say, I really do believe, for so many years, we were just treading water with the system. When you came on, and I really see this as having gotten our footing. You are making good progress. We have excellent plans for the future. So it really does seem to me like you are going out on a high note. You'll be so proud of yourself, and we're really going to miss you. I'm really going to miss you, Andrea.
Thank you.
Thanks for all of your work.
Thank you.
I'm serious. I really have seen the change over the years, and so happy, so proud. Great, thank you. That gets us to number 9, which is time if anybody has any agenda requests. Yeah.
I actually have to jump. My wife can't take my son to an appointment, so I need to check out, but there's nothing we're voting on. We have a quorum anyway, so I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're good.
Yep,
Okay.
we're just gonna say.
Don't steal anything. You guys just.
So we do have that request to look at our goals. We already mentioned that earlier in this meeting. Any other ideas, topics we want to look into?
The other item that I've been thinking about is the next year is shaping up to be a big transportation year legislatively. And whether there might be an opportunity for the MPO to be a participant in some of the conversations in the Oregon Transportation Forum or other opportunities that might be helpful. I'm not sure what that looks like. I mean, I know the city of Bend has lobbyists that we work with, but Tyler, do you have thoughts on this?
Well, I was going to say, the Oregon MPO Consortium, which is the statewide group that has 1 or 2 board members from each of the MPOs on it, their meeting is next Friday, I believe. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I think you're right. Yeah.
And we are going to have, I believe, either the LOC or AOC transportation lobbyists there, and possibly Eric Kanzler from the city to talk about at least get the discussion started about the 2025 legislative session, what that's going to look like. And so I think we will have getting the groundwork established, understanding what the groundwork looks like, and then coming back. I think there's definitely a role for the board, going into that session.
Okay.
In terms of identifying priorities and goals, that type of thing.
That sounds like a great opportunity.
And just a quick FYI, the Joint Transportation Committee is planning a road show statewide, and they've tentatively set September 12th as their date in Bend.
The other thing I would say, and this kind of is similar to goals, this is a very large, maybe is honestly the makeup of our board. One thing we have just, glancingly, whatever, but either way, but thought of, I think our charter says we are supposed to have all of the transportation providers from the region. And I think Ari maybe as well have thought that, well, that's CET, isn't it? Maybe there's a spot literally on our board for a CET person. Seems like that day we also said, well, what about the school district? They certainly are providing transportation for as many people. So, I do think that is something we, are interested in taking up it. And so I would just say to staff, maybe we can work on, when we might do that, when it might be appropriate. Ari, do you think I'm saying?
Sounds like a charter evaluation.
Yeah.
Right. So, I am first to acknowledge that could be a bigger project, figure out when we're going to fold that in, if we'll take it in pieces. I'm perfectly happy to just do that goal portion as it's single. But either way, that's the only thing that I have on my radar today for future agenda topics. You can always reach out to myself or to Tyler or to Kelly, Greg and James. I'm speaking to you as well. If you had, ideas on what you think this board should be doing, reach out to myself, reach out to Tyler. And then that gets us gets me to saying our next meeting is June 21st at noon in this same location. And that gives us just one last chance for public comment. Anyone like to speak to the board? I don't see any hands, so this meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Yay!